Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Nick.
And I'm Alistair.
And this fortnight we'll be talking about the latest Doctor Who spin-off, The War Between the Land and the Sea, and Hedda, a new adaptation of Hedda Gabler, directed by Nia DaCosta and starring Tessa Thompson. But before all of that, Alistair, what else have you consumed in the last fortnight?
I watched a film that caused a bit of buzz a few years ago, back in 2023. Japanese film called Perfect Days. This is a film that follows a man who is a toilet cleaner in Tokyo. His job is to clean public toilets. And it's a very sort of like quiet, I guess I'd say slow pace, but in a good way, sort of character study of this one man and his life. It follows him in his daily routines and the sort of simple life that he leads that seems to give him enormous joy and happiness. Yeah, taking pride in cleaning public toilets and just the sort of the few friends he has, his trips to sort of his local restaurant, the music that he likes, and the books that he reads. And it's very much sort of following his life in a kind of observational way, documenting it. Yeah, again, quite quiet, sort of soothing. And yeah, across the course of the film, he sort of encounters various people that shake up his worldview a little bit, but not in a sort of major way or in a grand, like, life-changing way, just sort of ways that enrich his life very much. I see why it captured people's attention, because it's like, it's quite different and it's quite sort of charming and sweet in its ways, so I can certainly recommend this film.
Okay, I hadn't heard of this one, so clearly out of the film community buzz. So I assume it just caused buzz because it was good then. It didn't cause buzz because anything heartbreakingly controversial happens in it.
No, it was just one of those things that people just seem to, the sort of word got around that, like, this is really like nice and charming, and I guess on some level it's sort of playing into some Japanese stereotypes, which I don't know if it's one of those reasons that it sort of resonated with the world outside Japan, because it's playing up to Japanese stereotypes in the way that British films that are kind of like about posh people in West London falling in love always seem to do much better than more quote-unquote realistic or more, at least more complex British films. But yeah, I guess it plays into some of those national stereotypes. I mean, specifically the joke that Japan takes great pride in its public toilets and how clean and they are and well designed and sort of high tech. But the other thing is that sort of the concept of silence is very important in Japanese culture, and sort of being quiet and sort of different ways silence is used. And yeah, it's a film with minimal dialogue. The main character is even described by some of his friends and stuff as, he's quiet, he doesn't say much. Minimal dialogue, footage of him watering his plants, cleaning his flat, going through the photographs that he's taken. And yeah, so I guess it's playing into this stereotype of this sort of like quiet, thoughtful nation at times. Though I never saw anyone explicitly say that's why they like it, but I think that's one of the reasons why it might have resonated. Although definitely people have been saying, like, I remember Chris Brosnahan, friend of the podcast, who was on to discuss, I think, Wolverine way back in the day.
Logan, the third Wolverine film.
Yeah. So I remember him saying to me, like, have you seen the Japanese toilet cleaning movie? Which it sort of went viral on that basis.
Okay, when you describe it like that, just makes it sound like, what was the movement called? Was it slowcore or something? Long films of just like train journeys.
Yeah, it's sort of, definitely in that vibe, in that it does have a sort of plot to it. I mean, it's a quiet, arty movie that doesn't have a particular sort of resignation, although there is definitely like a sort of character journey throughout. Like I say, he meets various people that sort of shake up his world. There's the girl that he's dating who really likes the music that he listens to. His niece runs away from home and stays with him for a bit, and that kind of builds up the character a bit more as you find out more about his family life. Yeah, and at the end he meets the ex-husband of the woman who runs the bar that he hangs out in. So these sort of small encounters sort of knock him off course a bit. This sort of arc is his growth with that, but it's one of those things that I can imagine, like, a lot of people saying it is very slow. I mean, there's probably more plot in like a 20-minute episode of The Simpsons than there is in this like sort of 2-hour plus film. But I think it is aiming at that slowcore thing, but also, I guess like playing into this Japanese idea of quietly crafting something that's like of high quality, like even if it's cleaning the toilets, and the sort of importance of silence. I mean, there's various scenes when he's like, say, cleaning a toilet and someone comes in to use the toilet and he's like, gets out because it gives him the space, and just while he's waiting to go back in and finish the job, he just has this tiny little smile on his face. It happens about 3 times in the film. He's just got this sense of like, someone's using the toilet that I cleaned. I'm proud of my work. Which is kind of funny, but also kind of sweet. So there's that sort of side to it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's different kinds of slowness, aren't there? I mean, we talked the other week, in fact, last episode, about, the slowness of Pluribus and the way it vaguely reprovoked the debate about how slow is too slow in TV pacing. And, I think the slowness of Pluribus is not quite as contented as this film sounds. That's more, an empty slowness because you're lonely.
I think there's actually is quite a lot of similarity between the two because, yeah, they're both, as you say, the slowness, and both of them have these like montages sort of documenting a process. Yeah, so you get sort of this like long montages of him cleaning a toilet or his morning routine, him getting up, him watering his plants, getting his van ready, getting the same soft drink each morning, or like his weekend routine where he goes to the photography shop, develops a reel of film he shot, goes to the bookshop, buys another book, goes through his photos, chooses the one he's keeping, then goes to the bar. So there is a very similar vibe there in that you're watching this sort of montage, this process unfold. And also, yeah, the question about Perfect Days is he lonely? Is he very happy? Or does he feel alone? Does he aspire for more? It's very much fly on the wall approach. You're seeing this man's life and you get a sense of his interiority from what he does and things like that. But again, it's very arty in the sense that like you don't get like big character moments when like a more mainstream film might have a moment of someone saying something, hey, the thing about you is, you know, or some kind of moment where he comes into conflict, you know, with someone that really shows like what his life's lacking or what he's reaching towards. When I was first watching, I thought, oh, is he going to meet someone and fall in love or something like that? Or is he going to have his life shook up in a more obvious way? I mean, again, you know, when his young niece, teenager girl, comes to live with him for a bit because she's run away from home, I think a lesser film would have had basically a brief bit at the beginning showing his life, then introduce her. She shakes up his life, throws him off his routine. He has to adapt. But really, she doesn't come into over halfway through the film, and rather than shaking up his life, follows it along for a bit, learns a bit from him, and then goes back to her life. And he's kind of all the time, it's kind of not going in this sort of like obvious direction. So in that sense, you know, you don't get a really obvious sense of this character, like what's he striving for. You know, it's not saying like, you know, in the way that Pluribus is, this is not to derogate Pluribus, just a different approach. It's not kind of saying, using these montages and this quietness to say this man is lonely. It's more kind of just saying like, this is his life, you know. He draws some form of meaning from it. Some people might argue that he would be better if he had more people in his life. Some people would argue that he seems happy, let people be happy. So it's more ambiguous in that sense. We're in the classic sort of art house tradition of like, what is this really trying to say?
Well, yeah, but it doesn't sound like it's trying to say that this man is crushingly miserable.
Oh, no, and things like that. Yeah, he seems to take value from his life and pride in his work and things like that. You know, in some ways you can see it's this sense of like, yeah, sort of celebrating like a simple, like well-lived life. It's set contemporary and he doesn't really sort of engage in much modern technology. He listens to all these cassettes and things like that. It does a really good soundtrack, yeah, just sort of the old music, listens to everything from Van Morrison to the Animals to Otis Redding. So it does have this great soundtrack of like, yeah, the music he plays in his van. It's a really good film. There's something really also really restful about just watching someone clean and like tidy up and things like that. Maybe that's just me. I like things to be clean and neat. But I could certainly really recommend this on the basis that it's like, it's very enjoyable and I think it's like quite accessible and things like that. It doesn't have a sort of complex, it's not mainstream as I just said, but it's not sort of like shooting off in various different directions like some films have. I kind of feel like, you know, a lot of like things like Bong Joon-ho and like other Far Eastern directors have these big tonal shifts that I think Western audiences find a bit jarring. A lot of Japanese films like Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy that has this just very different, slightly strange narrative structure that are, yeah, maybe less accessible. But this film is a very like kind of nice, accessible, relaxing, sort of heartwarming watch. So I can see why this film's got more attention outside Japan than maybe some of like, yeah, a film like Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy that is just less accessible. It's a simple way of putting it. But yeah, no, I'd recommend it. So there's a reason why the toilet cleaning film went a bit viral at least.
Yeah, sounds relaxing. Maybe if I watched this, I'd finally chill out.
I've been enjoying some slow cinema. Nick, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
I, over the last couple of months, have been watching another show on the long list of recent-ish shows from the peak TV era that I never quite got around to watching. I did mention this in my top 10 TV shows of the year blog post very briefly at the bottom. This is Barry, a comedy drama crime series about an assassin who goes to Los Angeles for a job and attends an acting class to help track down his target, and then ends up getting bit by the acting bug and staying on in Los Angeles to try and make it work. Also, he meets a nice girl there, which probably helps. And then, yes, then follows 4 seasons of increasingly bleak and often quite funny comedy drama antics in which this professional assassin tries desperately not to be an assassin, but struggles with it due to a combination of his underworld contacts refusing to let him go and the fact that it's actually quite hard to make it as an actor, so he doesn't really have any other way of earning money. Due to the fact that he's kind of a bit of a maladjusted sociopath, a lot of his attempts to do other things just don't really work out. Yeah, it's one of those shows which starts off as a bit of a actively silly knockabout black comedy and then gets increasingly serious and is this a comedy that's actually sad as it goes along. Like, yeah, season 1 is very, very funny in almost every scene. By season 4 and most of season 3, it's into a somewhat glum mode, as Barry increasingly just, I think, has a bit of a breakdown as he realises that he just can't seem to change and become a nicer person. So yeah, you know, more fun viewing. But yeah, no, I enjoyed this a lot. Yeah, as I say, it's one of these well-reviewed classics that I've been meaning to get to for a while.
That sounds good, sounds good. I've heard lots about this show, yeah, lots of people posting about it and recommending it, saying that it is very good. So yeah, especially like people who are fans of the comedy. But yeah, it sounds like a great premise for a sitcom or a comedy antics. But then I guess over time, does it drill more into his character and like why is he this way and uncover things and like trauma and things like that to make it a bit more serious?
A little bit, yeah. There's a bit more. His broad backstory is he was in the Marines and a few horrible things happened to him, and he also inevitably had a bit of a bleak childhood, and the show increasingly gets into that as it goes along. There is also a lot of, because he's in Los Angeles, and a lot of the other supporting casts, especially in the early parts of the show, are acting people he knows through his acting class. There's a bit of the old Hollywood satire as well. Lots of depressing meetings with cartoonish stereotypes of studio executives being hilariously awful. And this guy, Gene Cousineau, who's the teacher of his acting class, who he sort of really gloms onto as this father figure mentor, because to be honest, Barry's a bit of a simple childlike figure who just gets ridiculously over-attached to anyone who's even slightly nice to him. And yeah, he sort of gloms onto this Gene Cousineau guy, even though Gene Cousineau is kind of a self-centered arsehole, to be honest. Yeah, there's a lot of Hollywood satire along with the silly crime stuff, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. I said in my brief mention of it in the blog post that it was like Dexter, only better, which is quite glib, but certainly in terms of structure for this whole this man kills people in secret premise, it does do that a lot better. You know, there's 4 seasons, each was only 8 half-hour episodes long. He tries to keep it secret for a while. Spoilers, it eventually goes wrong, and things just fall apart after that. Bish, bash, bosh, the end.
Yeah, sounds good, sounds good. I mean, yeah, I could definitely see the similarities with Dexter. I mean, yeah, I guess crucially, Dexter isn't a comedy, but I guess there is like this element to dig into, like, why is this person this way, and like, why does he do these things?
Dexter does have the sort of black comedy tone, which isn't dissimilar to Barry either, but Barry is a bit more willing to be openly silly and have people just do really ridiculous things.
Yeah, I felt Dexter in the early years was also like very aware of like, this is a show about a serial killer. I mean, he's a serial killer who kills other murderers, but there were various ways they were sort of playing with it to make deal with the moral ambiguity of it being about a murderer, such as occasionally sort of some moments of borderline black comedy, as well as being the whole like, you know, Dexter's not a nice guy, he's been through some trauma. As it went by, it just, as we've well said, it kind of became like, yeah, isn't this guy awesome, he kills people. But yeah, I guess we're not here to discuss Dexter, but I could kind of see that, yeah, idea of like, let's unpack this character a bit, and like, we'll start with like sort of straight up premise of hitman becomes actor, and then after a while we'll unpack that a bit more, which is what gives shows longevity.
Well, yeah, I think Barry, because it tells this fairly contained story, I think it's fairly clear about what it is for most of its run, which is, you know, it's a show about this one sad, broken, miserable man who has this self-image of himself as being a nice guy, really, but also can't seem to stop himself from just, you know, killing people for money because he just can't think of anything else to do because he's just so directionless and confused and slightly stupid.
I mean, that is really funny.
Yeah.
I mean, that is just a great idea. Then obviously I can imagine they add elements of like black comedy of like when murders go wrong, basically, or
yeah,
or
there's a very funny episode at some point in season 2 or 3, I've actually forgotten because we watched it all in one big binge, where they go to kill someone and then his young daughter is there, but it turns out his young daughter has been taught martial arts by her father, so she then kicks Barry and his accomplice's ass, and then they have to chase her around the neighbourhood, and there's just this long ridiculous period of them desperately pursuing this young teen girl who is silently attacking them while they just grow increasingly furious.
Again, that does sound really, really funny. I can imagine that's a great premise for a comedic episode. So yeah, that does sound very good, yeah. And then so you say there's a sort of tonal change as it goes along, moving towards the bleaker end?
Yeah. As it goes along, it never stops throwing in the jokes, but it does tend to, I think, bend more towards being a character study of, Barry and the 3 or 4 other main characters and how they just don't seem to be able to move past their character flaws and they're just seemingly doomed to be sad. Which, as I say, doesn't make for the cheeriest viewing. It is another one of these comedies which becomes less of a comedy as it goes, but it's a good show, and that's the main thing. The 4th season is maybe occasionally gets into indulgent epilogue territory, but not enough to put me off it.
And does it have a sort of conclusive ending, or is it still going?
Oh, it's finished. No, 4 seasons are out. Yeah, no, the ending's pretty final. Yeah, I think we're done at this point.
It wasn't sort of just like unceremoniously cancelled.
No, it's got an ending. Yeah, as I say, the thing that probably puts this over Dexter, or certainly the original Dexter series, is they clearly had a steady eye on this as a story, not a franchise. So, yes, it actually finishes.
Yeah, they had an arc they were going to do, and then they completed it. So.
Yeah, they didn't keep pivoting back to the status quo because they just didn't want to stop the successful show.
Yeah.
So, there we go. Barry, good TV.
Yeah, no, I've heard lots of good things about this, from my comedy connoisseur friends. It's on the list. It's on the list.
It's as I say, they're half-hour episodes. It's only 4 8-episode seasons. So, on the list of shows you might one day watch, it's at least probably one of the shorter ones.
Next, this episode, we will be discussing The War Between the Land and the Sea, a new TV miniseries in the Doctor Who universe created by Russell T Davies. Tensions between humans and aquakind, species of people who live in the sea, are rising, and a war between the land and the sea looks inevitable. During tense negotiations led by UNIT from the Doctor Who world, Barclay Pierre Dupont is unexpectedly chosen to be the ambassador of the human race, where he develops an unexpected connection with aquakind ambassador Salt. We've seen this complete show from the BBC. Nick, what did you think of it?
I found this sort of entertaining but lightly frustrating because large parts of it are really good, and if they just tidied up the parts that are not good, which are mainly the ending, but some other bits as well, then it could have really landed. But, I don't want to take away entirely from the bits that are good. It's another sort of slightly angry-seeming dark satire drama from Russell T Davies, which is something he's done a bit over the last few years. Some in his Doctor Who run. That Years and Years show was not a dissimilar tone to this. It's something he does well. It's nice to see him, zeroing in on social change in this part of his career. There's a lot of fun moments, a lot of very on-the-nose but enjoyable analogies. Russell Tovey is an actor I always have time for, playing the sort of lovable everyman he's good at playing, and the steady build of tension does for the most part work quite well. Again, that's something Davies is usually very good at, building the stakes higher and higher and higher, only for them to then slightly deflate with a slightly weird ending, which is what again happens here. But yeah, a lot of it's pretty enjoyable.
Yeah, I really liked how this show began. Basically, I thought the first 3 episodes were really good and really tense, and then it sort of just went off the boil, and I didn't like the last episode really at all. So yeah, very much a sort of declining journey for me across this. I kind of really feel that they didn't know how to end it, so it just sort of meanders around a bit and then comes to a sort of abrupt conclusion. I mean, we can go into the last episode in more detail, but there is a lot of good Russell T Davies stuff here. I mean, the early episodes that are really tense, yeah, I felt you really kind of see why he's like a good writer. In fact, this show on some level contains some of the best and the worst of his runs as showrunner for Doctor Who, such as there are some episodes that are really, really great and tense, like for example episode 3, where they're just mainly based around them diving to the bottom of the sea. It's just contained episode. It's really tense. It's some great drama, some great character stuff, and then the sort of worst aspects of his Doctor Who writing come through, like sometimes he writes himself into a corner and doesn't really know the way out of it. Things sort of meander around a bit, and lots of different elements shooting off in different directions don't really come together very well. Very much a game of two halves.
Yeah, no, at the end of the penultimate episode of this, I came away thinking, okay, wow, how are they going to end this in one episode? It feels like he's really built up a lot of things going on at once in this really high-stakes way. And then I watched the last episode and was like, oh, it's just going to sort of stop. Okay, well, I guess that's the answer. Yeah, as you say, he's very good at character stuff, especially at making these massive, big, ridiculous concepts and thoughts he's having very accessible by putting them in the voice of, like, actually relatable people. Like, he's very good at writing normal people in a way that a lot of genre writers are not, to be honest. That's a lot of the strength of some of the early stuff. Russell Tovey here is a very good point-of-view character, helped by the fact that he's a good actor, but yeah, he's well written as well, and yeah, I mean, to be honest, going into this, I got the vague impression it was basically a spin-off series for the current generation of UNIT characters, which, in all honesty, didn't appeal to me that much, as, I mean, they're fine, I suppose. I didn't come away wanting to watch a show. So I didn't mind that it was mostly focusing on Russell Tovey.
Yeah, no, I like that aspect a lot as well. Yeah, I thought Russell Tovey's really, really good. As you say, he plays every man really well. I liked the character a lot. Again, sort of relatable. It's kind of believable how he's sort of, he's an admin person who gets caught in at the wrong moment, and then through a series of unlikely, like, sort of mistakes or coincidences, he ends up being ambassador for the human race because he's the only person who sort of showed the dead member of Homo Aqua some respect, things like that. And basically the fact that he's a nice guy means that he kind of gets thrust into the middle of this. And then there's some very tense bits when there's sort of pressures on him from every side. He's trying to, like, negotiate with this hostile other power. He's he's got pressure from various different factions on his own side, pushing and pulling him in different directions. He's not trained for this. He's inexperienced. He's trying to use his good nature and sort of natural instincts and judgment to try and navigate his way through this, whilst also surrounded by people who don't want him to do that. That stuff's all really good, and like there's a lot of tension there. There's a lot of good character stuff there. I like the fact that a lot of the show is based around the relationship between the Russell Tovey character and Salt, the ambassador from Aquakind. And I did like one thing about the final episode is that it still keeps the relationship and the focus very much on their connection and their relationship. Yeah, again, that's a good piece of Rusty Davis writing. You know, he's always thinking like, what's the character connection here that people will hold on to? Or there's this relation to these characters, keep that going and stuff. The problem is just all the other bigger stuff didn't really like fit into that neatly or effectively. But I guess there is quite a bit to like here in that sense.
Yeah, I think it suffers from the same tonal dissonance as a lot of past Torchwood did, really. I mean, it's not as bad as the worst of Torchwood, don't get me wrong. But a lot of the story has this quite grounded, serious tone. It is going a bit more for sci-fi political thriller rather than the sort of bigger, sillier Doctor Who vibe. But a lot of it, especially the bits outside, as you say, the core relationship that Davis cares about, and the core stuff around the Barclay character, is played kind of very broadly and borderline silly. Like some of the like government and corporate interest characters are like cartoonishly evil, and that stuff just sort of sits alongside this slightly sort of serious, ominous, foreboding tone.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's one of those things that I don't often say this. I always got the feeling it might have benefited for being slightly longer. The first 3 episodes are really good when it's just basically about these negotiations and the pressure on him, and then as it broadens out, it kind of needed some more time maybe to build up the elements that are introduced later on in the story, and also to build up the villains a bit. I mean, it's got a very clear political and environmental message, especially like it's very straight up like what we're doing to the planet is wrong, we need to fix it, and what's stopping it are basically like greedy big business that's captured the military and like leading politicians and things like that. And it's very straight up a bit. I mean, in some ways it's interesting that a show that's just this bold basically about like do something about the environment and it's big business that's stopping it is kind of got made and got put on TV, you know. So I'm supportive of that, but you are right, the villains are we're just evil people who like want to kill people because our friends in big business tell us to do it. Plus also bizarrely, one of the villains is a French woman who's supposed to be an admiral, I think, and she's got to be the youngest admiral that humanity's ever produced. I mean, she looks like she's like 28 or something like that, and she's supposed to be in charge of the French military. I just thought, could they not find a late middle-aged French woman to be in this? I guess not. I mean, that's just more of an aside, but it did kind of add to the sense of like these characters have not been thought through to any extent. Like, how did someone that young become in charge of like the French Navy or whatever?
Yeah, no, fair point. Didn't realise that myself, but no, valid. Yeah, those whole bits, yeah, as you say, felt a bit thin. I don't know, I have a lot of good memories of Torchwood Children of Earth, the first Torchwood series that Russell T Davies ran entirely himself. And this does bring me back to that a bit in terms of tone, although it's nowhere near as good as that, because that was among his better bits of writing, full stop, whereas this is merely quite good in places. Yeah,
and also Children of Earth was a kind of self-contained mini-series. I guess it was picking up some Torchwood characters and continuing them as well, which I get the feeling there isn't plans to do more of this. But yeah, it was very much put forward as like a self-contained story. We're telling a story with a beginning, middle and end, not like a TV show where there's like an adventure of the week like Torchwood was. And this is totally very similar. Again, it's a structured story in parts. But yeah, just for example, like Peter Capaldi character in Children of Earth was just, you know, even though he's kind of a bit of a villain, but he was just a much more emotionally complex character where you can kind of see, even when he does terrible things, and like you can kind of see where he's coming from and things like that. Whereas, like I say, these people are just like, you know, I'm a politician, I take calls from big American businessmen who just tell me, yeah, you just tell me we got to kill all the fish people. Okay. Like, yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll do that because I'm a sort of bit Brexity. I'm there for the political message, which is like very much like, yeah, do something about the environment. And I did like that. And even other things like at one point someone says like it's all about the great replacement. They're concerned that like Homo Aqua will replace us and things like that. It's like he's literally straight up saying like the villains are like, you know, Nigel Farage and whatever and big business and military people. But one of the things, it's something that I might be like, yes, Doctor Who, it's aimed at children, but I get the feeling this is not really so much aimed at children in the same way Doctor Who is. It's definitely more mature. I don't mean mature in a way of like Torchwood with the shagging alien. I meant more like it's much slower paced and unfolds more slowly, which actually I quite liked, because Doctor Who can be very fast paced and really cannon through things for various reasons, like it's doing Adventure of the Week and it's trying to get through a lot and it's aimed at a young audience. What I really liked about the first 3 episodes was this felt like Rusty Davies was giving the story a bit more space to breathe, unfolding things at a slower, sustained tension, which requires at least like a more mature mature sensibility for watching TV and enjoying a story. So I did kind of feel this was a bit more grown up, and I really kind of appreciated that after watching his recent Doctor Who. But then it's just a bit of a shame that although the pacing and some of the characterization was more grown up, the politics really was at a very much like teenager, kind of like shouting at people what to do against the cartoon baddies. Even like in the very final episode, it ends with, I mean, this is possibly a little bit of a spoiler, but like with, the Kate Lethbridge-Stewart character pointing a gun directly at the audience saying, "Clean it up," which is kind of like Chris Chibnall level of subtlety.
Yeah, that's the post-credits scene to set up future projects. ? The future spin-off series where Kate Lethbridge-Stewart becomes a terrifying environmental vigilante just gunning people down in the street for littering. Coming soon to Disney+.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, we'll enjoy that.
And speaking of, the unit stuff, I mean, to be honest, I was not massively excited for a unit show, but ultimately they were mostly fine. I think Gemma Redgrave does a decent job of being the serious but not evil human leader, although I didn't care that much about her slightly thinly sketched love interest, to be honest. I know it was slightly set up in Doctor Who in a couple of scenes, but sorry, Russell, I didn't care when that man died.
No, I was also there as well. Yeah, that's exactly what I felt, which is that like these are kind of supporting characters from Doctor Who. They hadn't really been built up. I mean, it took the right decision, I think, to introduce new characters like the Salt and Barclay and focus on them. I mean, had they done 5 episodes just on the unit characters, maybe that guy would have been a more developed character, so we might have cared when he died. But he was very much like 8th on the cast list, somewhere around the level of characterization or screen time as the implausibly young French admiral. Yeah, just that emotional moment didn't land. And a lot of what we say about Russell T Davies's writing is that sometimes, there might be a little bit of a plot hole or something like that, but he gets the big, broad emotional strokes right. Like, I really thought like the end of the Shooting Outward first season of Doctor Who, like some of it maybe didn't like hang together properly, but it had that big like emotional arc that really landed. So yeah, that was great. Whereas I did feel with this, like some of the big emotional moments didn't work. And like when I was watching the final episode, I was literally sitting there thinking, this is kind of meandering all over the place a bit, but I'm waiting for that Russell T Davies emotion to wrap it all up. And yeah, it wasn't quite there. Like I say, the death of Kate's love interest,
whose name we can't remember, obviously.
Yeah, I can't remember. The handsome guy.
Yeah.
He's the handsome one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that didn't really land. There was a very big emotional sort of moment, which is, again, I don't know, sort of dark emotional moment, which Russell T Davies does. Again, it was a bit Children of Earth does the same thing. I'm not going to spoil it here for people who haven't seen it, but it was maybe better than the death of the love interest. But I feel that the emotion just didn't land in the way that it really does when he makes it work. And that's kind of his big bit, doing a big, like, emotional moment at the climax. And, it just wasn't that there and satisfactory this time.
Yeah, I mean, the ending, I think I'm going to mildly spoil the structure of the ending, so,
Yeah.
Run if you care. Okay. Yeah, I think the ending basically just felt a bit like it just stopped. In the previous episode, they basically said, we're going to kill all the fish people. And in the next episode, just as the good guys were considering doing some diplomacy to end the war, they killed all the fish people. And that was it. It doesn't really count as a twist. The good guys didn't get a chance to fight against it or really do anything. It just kind of happened. And I was a bit sort of, oh, okay. I can't even complain, but that's a Deus Ex Machina because you told me it was going to happen. So it's just weird.
Yeah. I guess he was going for the big moments of like humans are the real villains.
Yeah, I guess so. And I maybe have seen that sort of angry, dark cynicism from Davis before, and, not unearned, we do suck. But as a story, it just felt a bit odd that basically nothing the good guys did in the last few episodes really mattered. Really, if they'd sort of heroically struggled to stop the baddies killing all the fish people and failed, then that would probably have worked better, I think. But the fact it just sort of happened and that was it was a bit, okay. Sure, guess it's over now.
Yeah, it goes back to, I think what I was saying, that he wasn't exactly sure how to end it, so he just had the villains kill the fish people.
Yep.
And it's bad. I mean, had it been like one of the less subtle episodes of like classic Who, or stories, I suppose, the whole thing would have been set up as, the fish people are the villains. And he's trying to do a more complex version where like the fish people are just the opponents. They have a different take in that they want to share this planet and we're polluting it and poisoning it. And also he's got messages about the environment and about, toleration and, having to accept people who are different and, migration and othering and all those sort of things. So yeah, he's got this like, the baddies are not the weird alien type people who look different. The baddies are the people who looked respectable and normal but actually want to kill like 1 billion people because like they don't want to dismantle capitalism. They would rather kill, several billion people than stop making money. And that's what he's aiming at. And again, like say, like I'm on board for all of this, but like it just doesn't quite like land us a story. The last episode, there's a lot of the characters doing sort of things. There's a lot of basically, Barclay trying to get back in contact with Salt, and like lots of shots of Russell Tovey just screaming into the sea. And again, I was thinking like, I don't really get where this is going, and it doesn't really have much to do with, them negotiating the end of this war, which I thought what the show was about. And so it's just the plot sort of meandering, not really sure what to do with itself until, there's a big horrible moment and like everyone ends up dead. I can just kind of see the way that this could have been done better, as you say, in many ways, but it just sort of isn't. And I guess the other thing is, I would say, is that although I'm on board for the political message as well, but I was a little bit concerned that when things get this unsubtle, that like it's actually sometimes not helping. Like I can imagine if you were in any way hostile to the message of this show, like you were like not environmentalist, or possibly the sort of person who finds like Extinction Rebellion really annoying, they're going to look at this and go like, oh, this is what all environmentalists are like. They just think that like anyone who's like in business or, the military, or like likes the military, is just like a genocidal monster who wants to kill everyone, rather than like close some factories. And it's so unsubtle, I can imagine it being quite alienating. It's not like I'm disagreeing with anything Russell T Davies is saying, with his full chest in this show. So there's that.
Yeah, as I say, I think it pivots almost strangely between attempting to do nuanced adult drama and, as you say, being as subtle as a brick to the head.
Yeah.
One of the many slightly odd things about this show.
Yeah.
Also, the title is not a good title. There are more important things, but the war between the land and the sea, it's clunky, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's got way too many words, and most of those words are like...
The, or and.
The, yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, it's got 3 the's in it, in the title, which is excessive. I think possibly that, like, this is suffering from the fact that like the bad bit at the end means that like, well, I'm left with the thoughts of the bits at the end that don't really work, rather than the bits in the middle and the beginning that really did work. Like, I liked the everyman thing. I wasn't so much of a fan of how he became more of a chosen one at the end. Like, he's the one with like this sort of special connection, and that's not really like an everyman. That's kind of, there's something special about him. Plus, they didn't really explain how that worked or why.
I sort of assumed it was something that was done to him by Salt in order to let him survive the undersea explosion in episode 3, but it was never explicitly stated, I don't think.
Yeah, and again, but they're sort of building up like, what is the connection between these two? But we don't really find out. Yeah, I guess it's like a sort of storytelling setup thing that's not paid off, which isn't really make for great writing.
I mean, who knows? We may never know the behind the scenes machinations of Disney or whatever. It does slightly feel like he got to the end of episode 4 and then realised, oh shit, I've only got 1 episode to wrap this up, which you'd think, being in charge, he would have known, but it does have some odd pacing in it in that way.
It really does have that vibe. You're completely right, yeah. But the weird thing is that when it's good, it is really, really good. And like, some of the best bits of it are just Barclay at the front of the sort of human delegation, arguing, trying to read out political statements to Salt, whilst people are whispering in his ear, telling him to tell him different political statements, what he wants to do. And like, on paper, that sounds kind of boring. It's just like how negotiations work. I mean, this time it's got fish people in it, but that is just super tense. You can really see him wrestling with what he thinks is right versus like what people want him to do, and the fact that he's also aware that he's in over his head, so maybe he should do what the experts say, but he knows it's wrong, etc., etc. And like, it's really, really tense, and that kind of writing is not easy. It's easy to write tense chases and explosions and things like that, but at the same time, it's also difficult to do people arguing and like with high stakes, but like making it really apparent and stuff. So there are some great bits, like in episode 2, when he is trying to be the ambassador, or episode 3 when they're in this pod and it's very claustrophobic. So again, like, it's hard to write tension when it's just like 5 people in a small room. It's kind of weird that like when it's good, it's just like really, really good. So yeah, I just want to praise some of the really like accomplished writing in it as well.
Yeah, as you say, the sort of steady build up of like diplomatic pressure is very well played, and Davis always has a good eye for a sort of holy shit end of episode moment. A lot of the ones at the end of every episode, especially the first 3 episodes, are extremely good and extremely tense and do leave you really wanting that next episode.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And I kind of wanted to see more of the Aqua People's Undersea Kingdom, which is where I thought it was going. I thought like the first half would be negotiations on land and the second one negotiations in the sea. I don't know if it's just the special effects budget didn't stretch to that.
I suspect so, yeah. All we see of the Aquakind Kingdom is that it's a place where they stand on platforms.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But I suppose, it's not the creators' fault if they didn't have the sort of the budget of like an Apple TV show, but the first half definitely like is just good.
Yep, so there we go. It's a war of 2 halves.
Yeah. I like the land, maybe not the sea. Finally, this episode, we will be discussing Hedda, starring Tessa Thompson, a new adaptation of Hedda Gabler by Heinrich Ibsen. This version updates the setting to 1950s England. Hedda has recently married the boring but reliable academic George Tesman, and moved into a grand country house, thinking that her days of youthful abandon are behind her. During a party she throws, her lover Eileen returns, having written a new manuscript, and is competing for the same professorship as George. As the party unfolds, Hedda schemes to bring her down. We've seen this film on Amazon Prime. Nick, what did you think of it?
Well, I came into this with no prior knowledge of Hedda Gabler, and I'm happy to say I was still able to have a good time here. I thought it was very atmospheric, very nicely shot, and mostly, to be honest, pretty much commanded by Tessa Thompson in the big central role, absolutely playing the shit out of it. Like, I know we've had the Oscar nominations, and I don't believe Tessa Thompson was nominated, but I enjoyed her a lot in this. Yeah, I've always enjoyed a bit of somewhat Shakespearean tragedy, or, you know, specifically tragedies written by Shakespeare, and there's a lot of that vibe here. Yeah, I've since looked up a few of the differences between this and the original play, which is kind of interesting in itself, but yeah, this was compelling. I thought this was fun.
Yeah, I like this a lot as well. I thought it was really well done. It's a good page to screen adaptation that's not too stagey, which like a lot of this sort of thing can be. And like I say, they've come with some interesting variations in it, but what I actually liked about it was that it's pretty close to the original. It basically kind of unfolds pretty much beat for beat, with a few things swapped out, yeah, just to make it fit the changes they made, which we'll come to, but it's very on the nose, yeah, which I liked a lot. You really get the sense of like, yeah, the complex characters coming through, they're all very rich individuals with their own lives and things like that. It works really well, and this great sense of Hedda as a sort of likable and dislikable character. She doesn't really love George. She isn't really sure what she sort of wants from life, but she's sort of feels like she's running out of options. She's sort of scheming, which is kind of unpleasant, but also at the same time she seems to deeply care about these people. She's not just completely cold-hearted, so, or at least the people from her past. So yeah, there's a real complexity here, sort of moral grey areas that really work.
Yeah, I think that is the main thing. Tessa Thompson is doing well here, yeah. Both having fun with Hedda as this sort of scheming villain, but also, yeah, managing to play somewhat sympathetically her genuine love for some of the characters and how trapped she feels and how she feels she just has to do certain things. And I guess that's what you want in a good story, but also especially this kind of tragedy. The feeling that the characters are kind of almost swept against their will in a way that they can't really control, even though they are making the decisions towards this sort of tragic end, which does kind of work here.
Yeah. And that element comes very much from the Ibsen original, which is it is about how women don't have these like choices and things like that. They don't have the freedom to kind of do what they want as men do. So like, Hedda has to marry, and she has to like make this marriage a success, things like that, because she can't just kind of like live the life that she wants, especially now that she's like, supposedly getting older and stuff, and can't just rely on her youth and good looks, things like that. So she needs to like have money and things like that. Yeah, so it's kind of really like dealing with those elements. Interesting that they've taken that from the original, which was written set when it's written in Oslo in the sort of late 19th century, moved it to the 1950s and kept the themes very much in parallel. And it still also has relevance to today's sort of world, this element of women have less options than men, and there's just not the same safety net there. So there's, they have to make the right decisions at different times. So yeah, they're kind of keeping these sort of the important themes of the original going.
Thus, she did all this to afford her mortgage. Truly, the housing crisis never ends.
Exactly, yeah. Something we can all relate to now.
But yeah, as I say, I'm not an expert in the original Ibsen play. I only very briefly read the Wikipedia page after watching the film. But yeah, it seems like, they've more or less preserved the key points. The original play wasn't set at like one party in this way, was it? It wasn't quite as contained.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Which is almost interesting, because I would see that as a more sort of stagey theatrical decision to try and do it all in one party. But that seems to be something they've added for the film.
Yeah, which actually, you're right, is very stagey. Yeah, to have everything, all events unfold in real time or something approaching real time and in one location. Which is, it kind of works quite well, and it brings in this sort of like 50s glamour to it as well, with the costuming and the set design. You've also got the element of these old country houses that were like falling into disrepair. It's around this period the National Trust starts buying them so they don't like completely collapse, and like it's mentioned that like this beautiful old country house that was in disrepair when they bought it, the period details were really, really well done. It's there's just beautiful costuming, set design, period music, things like that. So yeah, if you love the sort of arts of set dressing and costuming, or if you love the period as well, then you'll really, really enjoy this.
Yeah, I felt like this was a bit of a sort of post-Saltburn movie. There was a bit of that sort of shooting style here. Look at all the luxury sort of lingering on the opulence of it all. I don't think it was quite as into the sort of prurient content, but it was still in that way.
Yeah. And again, like another film about a big like country house and things
Well,
like
yeah.
that. And I kind of liked how the party gets more debauched as it goes along. It starts as something like just sort of drinking and dancing and kind of witty banter and cocktails and stuff, and what you expect 1950s parties to be like. And then later on, there's like, yeah, the people are doing cocaine and like having sex in the maze and things like that. And it goes like, okay, this become fully debauched. So yeah, all you'd expect from a contemporary club night.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I really enjoyed this. It was very indulgent and melodramatic, but I think that's within the confines of the genre, a sort of vague, numbing silliness and the inevitable bit of Chekhov's gun action.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I liked about it as well is how it begins with Tessa being interviewed by the police, like clearly in the aftermath of a party. You know something violent has happened, and then it goes back and you see the events unfold. And that really adds tension to it. This element of, you know something violent's going to happen at some point, and you can kind of, you know that's where it's going. So everything is like undercut. Every mistake or rivalry or jab between the characters is undercut with this sense of like, this will eventually explode into like violence that's bad enough that the police get involved. Maybe someone dies or something like that. So that really like adds tension to it as well. And so I thought that was like really meant that like these scenes of people partying and having fun had this like, yeah, real like slow border tension underneath it.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of the first, I don't know, let's say half of the film is, I guess, quite a slow build to things kicking off. So I guess maybe you want to have that to, yeah, make sure people know that, don't worry, drama and tragedy is coming.
Exactly, yeah. And I liked a lot of the changes that they made as well. One thing, obviously, is casting Tessa Thompson, you know, a black woman in the role, adds a racial dimension to this. And also, this is not done in a sort of Bridgerton-style race-blind casting, which there's a place for that, and it can lead to some good stuff. But it is directly addressed that Hedda is, you know, a black woman in this, and, you know, that she has, like, say, like less social options even than white women at the time, things like that. And it's even said that, like, you know, when she's talking to her ex-lover Eileen, who's much more bohemian and living free, and she said, like, you know, women can live free, you don't have to marry a man and just like be a domestic housewife, people do it. And then she's very much like, yeah, but people who are white. It is like, yeah, directly addressing race in this element of having like a woman of color playing a role that is typically like reserved for like white women, especially if you're not gonna set it like in, you know, 2025.
Yeah, and they've also changed the gender of her love interest.
Yeah, that's the other interesting big change, which is, yeah, it's a man, the rival academic in the play. It is, I'm going to butcher the Norwegian name, and it's Elliot. Is that a Norwegian spelling? Elliot? I think so, maybe, yeah. Elliot Lovborg has become like Eileen Lovborg, which adds this element of, she's obviously, yeah, she's a queer woman. She's like out and proud, and like in the play, the like Hedda was Elliot's lover in the past, and that's like secret, but obviously now there's an obvious reason why it has to be secret because, you know, they were gay lovers. And the Imogen Poots character, I thought Imogen Poots was also really good in this, playing Eileen's new lover. Again, there's more stakes here when it's like she's left her husband for a woman rather than like left her husband for like a sort of bohemian academic. And the Eileen character being out in public, exploring queerness, that's a very interesting element to it, which again, something that you could conceivably do, it would be scandalous and again a high risk in the 1950s, but you living that kind of lifestyle is very different to living it in the 1890s when the play was originally set. So that's another interesting element that they've changed up.
Well, yeah, I guess it adds to the mounting sense of tragedy throughout, as Hedda, I guess, feels she just can't do that, which again gives Tessa Thompson yet more to play with.
I think the other change, which is interesting as well, that they made, which is that like they made it's more explicitly about sex. And one of the ways they've done this is the book that Eileen has written, and that's going to make her some name as academic and take this role that George wants, is about sex, and it's about people's kinks or unusual sexual desires and things like that, or like risque things, which obviously at the time included their homosexuality as like, yes, and there was unusual and risque. And I don't think it said in the original play kind of what this blockbuster book is actually about. So that's something they've added, which is this element of Eileen's living this kind of bohemian academic existence, basically of being like openly queer and also openly writing about sex and women's sexuality and things like that, which is like a very bold thing to do in the 1950s. But again, it's sort of time when you could kind of get away with that as like a bohemian thing versus like the Victorian times. But it also has this element, which I thought was really well done, of like Eileen sort of aiming at this sort of mainstream academic success by being an outsider and being different and shaking up the world. And the rooms, you know, which George moves in, of the sort of stuffy, very formal men, which at the party, is they like her because she's eccentric and different, but also they treat Rita almost a bit like somewhere between a pet and this sort of weirdo who's wandered in, that like, or like a clown who like amuses them. And her status in the world is very like on a knife edge between basically being a bit ridiculous but also being this kind of genius who's like blowing everything up. And it's like a very much a high risk venture, which of being like openly queer and like writing about sex and things like that. I think all this is not stuff that's in the original book, but it adds this element of like she has to make this a success. Eileen has to succeed, but also she kind of like lives this like uninhibited like open life when like Hedda like hides it away and is just sort of more like trying to fit into society. And those elements are very interesting, and also it's very relevant today when like again there are people from the academic world to the writing world to the content creation world who, you know, are queer or like explore sex or both, things like that, who use it as this big way to like, you know, it gets attention, it shakes people's up, it can be used to build a career, but also at the same time it can be difficult when being treated as the sort of the sex person or the sex expert. Can be, especially if you're a woman, it can be a label, it can be hard to get out from under, it can lead to you being not taken seriously. So that element is still very much present today, and I thought that was a really interesting addition.
Yeah, and I've seen people write about that, especially I think it was quite present in the 2010s, the write about your pain for content type thing. There were a lot of blogs which got a lot of traction off people, again, I think often women, writing about horrible things that had happened to them to educate us / get clicks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've heard it referred to as the first-person industrial complex. There's this kind of all these first-person monologue essays coming out, you know, like that from Jezebel and like Vice and things like that, and these like internet-only content publishers and things like that. And there would, back in the time when Facebook would really push external links before they decided they didn't want to send people outside of Facebook because they want to monopolize their attention and they got worried about fake news. So when you could like, again, you could write a searing like, you know, first-person account of something horrible that happened to you and sell it as journalism, and then it would get lots of attention on Twitter and things like that. And, you know, lots of people made a career out of that, and some people have partialed it into mainstream success. Some people, you know, like, again, writers I really like Laurie Penny kind of does that, again, a queer woman, a bit of an outsider, neurodivergent, alternative, in many ways, writing first-person stuff that's gaining attention, but then now the world has changed, and, like, I don't know, like, less interesting writers, but also more mainstream, like male writers coming through at the time have, you know, eclipsed their sort of careers. And it's still that same thing, like, yeah, you can use this sort of sex outrage and queerness and things like to get attention. And obviously that means a lot to the people from those worlds. But at the same time, if you're thinking about the establishment, you know, not a lot has changed from what's predicted and what's shown in Hedda. And yeah, I thought that was a really interesting element to this film.
Well, yeah, the sense that if she gets a bit drunk at a party and acts up a bit, then her career might well be over, which...
Yeah.
I don't know. One gets the feeling it might not be true if you were a man.
Exactly, yeah. So there's a lot of like, yeah, interesting elements they've added to it, and it's always a good thing about a great adaptation, which is that like they take the original, they find what's like interesting about it and key to it, build that up, but also like add other elements, other interesting takes, be it by like casting people of colour or gender swapping roles, things like that, to add elements to it. Like again, it reminds me of a few years ago there was a very successful West End adaptation of Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller, with the family being black. And it just adds a whole other dimension to it when you do things like that. That's always like an interesting adaptation for something that's, again, like over 125 years old, like Hedda Gabler, and it's been done so many times. Coming up with like interesting new takes is the real skill.
Yeah, Hedda Gabler's a weird one for me in that it's not a story that I was ever super familiar with. It seems to be a play that has a certain amount of name recognition but isn't necessarily among the perennial kids are forced to read it in school classics list. I've definitely heard of Hedda Gabler, but I couldn't have told you the plot until I watched this.
Ibsen's not really done for GCSEs. I don't know, do you read Ibsen for A-level? Maybe it depends what course you do. Ibsen gets done a lot by people who study acting rather than people who study literature. He's very popular. I think he's been claimed that like he's the most performed playwright after Shakespeare, although I've heard that claimed about Samuel Beckett as well. The version I saw this before was like a student actor production. So I think Ibsen gets done a lot by student actors, but not so much by literature students. So he's less well known. And this is probably isn't, although it's well known, it's not as well known as some of Ibsen's other plays like Enemy of the People or things like that, Doll's House.
I don't know. I don't have a survey handy on the cultural penetration of Hedda Gabler. I can't tell if I'm just universalising my own experiences here, or if there are probably less people who know what happens in Hedda Gabler than there are in, obviously, the big Shakespeare plays.
Oh, yeah. It's not as well known as, say, like Macbeth or something like that people will read at GCSEs. But, yeah, and I guess it has a certain, like, cachet amongst, like, arty people who go to film festival films or independent films. So this caused waves at the London Film Festival Festival. It was in the official competition there and had a gala screening and things like that. So it was quite a big film then. And I was wondering if it's going to be one of the big films for the Oscars this year. It was clearly been set up alongside things that have got lots of Oscar nominations like Hamnet and things like that. It's interesting that it didn't cut through, but I guess not everything can be a success in that way. I thought this was very good, and it, probably deserves to be considered for Oscars. Certainly for Tessa Thompson, she's phenomenal in this role. And like I say, it's a challenging role, but she's very good in this.
Yeah, I'm not a real film critic, but I thought the Tessa Thompson performance at the very least is as good as anything I've seen. I enjoyed this a lot, both as an educational experience and just for pure entertainment.
I think you are a real film critic, but you've got 10 years of experience behind the mic now.
Fair enough.
That's just some British self-deprecation as we all...
There we go, fine. I'm a real film critic. Someone invite me to free screenings, damn it.
Yeah. Still haven't managed to crack that nut yet. But yeah, 10 years, but not long. So yeah, it's a preview, dear listeners. 10 years.
Yeah. A little hint at some content that's coming soon. We've been doing this for a decade. Think about that. Okay, and that was Moderate Fantasy Violence. Thank you very much for listening. As ever, if you have enjoyed this experience, you can go on our website at moderatefantasyviolence.com and listen to hours more of us podcasting, plus our recent end-of-year blog posts. And if you like it, then why not give us a 5-star review at literally any place that will let you do that. Thank you.
You can also get more from us on social media. Follow us on Blue Sky, where we're at MFV Podcast, or follow us on Facebook by searching for Moderate Fantasy Violence. You can also get more from me on social media. You can search for Alistair Ball on Blue Sky, Instagram or TikTok. You can find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com, and you can find my theatre reviews at everythingtheatre.com.
And you can find me online at nickbryan.com with a dot on the internet and on Blue Sky, and with the word dot on Instagram, where you can hear about my self-published comics, such as the upcoming second volume of Courier Z, which is alarmingly close now. I really must finish organising that. And you can also come back in 2 weeks for the next episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence, when we will be covering the second season of Amazon post-apocalyptic drama Fallout and surreal Oscar hopeful movie Begonia. See you then for that. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, the war between the land and the sea, or twat blast, as I saw someone calling it, which barely works.
But I was about to say, that's going to take me a while to work out if that actually is an acronym.
If you change several of the letters around and add a couple more letters, then yes.
Isn't that true of everything?
Yeah. Yeah, all you need to do is swap the B and the T, add another T at the end, and add in a couple of vowels.
Yeah, I feel that you're really reaching for it. But to be fair, I guess maybe the show Twat Blast would have been a more eye-catching title than The War Between the Land and the Sea, which is, if anything, a bit long for a title.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to this in the review, but it's a terrible title, yeah.
Okay, right. Shall I kick us off? Twat Blast. I did not.
If you can,
I hadn't
sure.
seen that before. I hadn't seen that. Right, this is supposed to be a serious show.